My career took off when I started following the Word of God. Undeniable. There's a flourishing that occurs that I just don't think can occur any other way.
Hello, and welcome to Working with me, Dan Doriani, hosting a podcast where we explore faith, work, culture, and the way believers can make a difference in their corner of the world. Okay, well, hello, everybody. Today we have Brent Beshore, and he is an entrepreneur, and he's the founder and the CEO of a firm called Permanent Equity. For some people, the minute you hear the word equity, you start to shiver because you think, oh, equity, is that like private equity? Dan, I thought you were a good guy. Why would you have a private equity person on your podcast? Aren't they scoundrels who strip wealth and destroy corporations? How can it possibly be that you have a private equity person? Brent Beshore, you founded, you're the CEO of Permanent Equity. What is it? What do you do? I've got a book that you wrote called The Messy Marketplace. It's about corporations and buying them and running them and things of that nature. We're glad you're here. Would you please tell us what you do and who you are? And we'll get into your faith a little bit later, but tell us about yourself and your corporation first.
Yeah, well, Dan, thanks for having me. I mean, we are scoundrels. I mean, we're the only people who look up to lawyers in reputation. So I appreciate. Maybe we should just conclude in prayer. Yeah, no, I totally understand. But yeah, private equity does not have a fantastic reputation, and for a good reason. I think there's a lot of things about the way private equity goes about doing things that is the wrong incentives is the easiest way to describe it. And so I didn't get into private equity by working at another firm. I got into it because I was an entrepreneur. I founded some businesses, and then I accidentally bought a business actually in St. Louis 15 years ago. That really opened my eyes to there being this whole world of opportunities to help transition family-owned businesses. And the traditional playbook to do so, that is called private equity, is actually based on the model that KKR, which is one of the big private equity firms, pioneered in the 80s. There's a really good book, really interesting book called Barbarians at the Gate.
Yes.
About the J.R. Nabisco deal. And it was, the model is to buy a company with as much debt as you possibly can. So put in as little equity. And when you think equity, think about the equity in your home. If you were to go buy a home, how much
40% down or 20% down or 10%
20%
down
or 5% down. Right. Yeah, exactly. And so if you think about it, private equity is kind of the same idea as they're buying a business, but and they're trying to use as little equity as they can, because if the business goes well and they used a little bit of equity and the business increases a lot in valuation,
you leverage that,
then their equity is worth a
right?
lot more. Yeah. I mean, it's a way to do that. So the way that traditionally private equity runs is they'll buy a business like that. They'll put a lot of debt on it, and then they'll usually try to make the financials appear better. And so how do you make financials appear? You can either increase the top line, right? Increase the revenue growth and gross profit growth of the business, or you can cut expenses. And what's easier to do?
It's a lot easier to cut expenses by laying people off.
Exactly. And so what they do is they look for opportunities to make the business more efficient. And by the way, sometimes businesses do need to get a lot more efficient, right? So it's not all bad, but that's not the method that we do either. And so then oftentimes within a short period of time, they're going to try to sell it to somebody else. So we call it the buy, lever, strip, and flip model, right? So you lever it up.
Strip means, sorry. I just want to make sure people understand. Strip means not only lay off workers, but it can also mean strip it of assets, like if they have some land or maybe a building or some investment that's not paying off yet, you also strip that out too.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I mean, you're basically trying to make the business appear as successful financially as you possibly can make it, as quick as you can, and then you try to sell it to somebody else and really get that difference between whatever you bought it for and whatever you sold it for, pay back the debt that you put on the business, and then your equity is worth a lot more. Now, the challenge with that is, if you think about it, who are the only people who benefit from that model? Well, it's probably the seller, right, who sold the business for a lot of money, and then the buyer who bought the business and now can flip it to somebody else and make a lot of money. Everyone else loses. Now, as we know, the only way to play long-term games successfully is if everyone wins. But they're not playing long-term, they're playing short-term. And so oftentimes this is the reason why this is done is because LPs, which are the investors into private equity, only allow them to have capital for a very short period of time.
Tell me what an LP is.
Yeah, it's called a limited partner. So a limited partner is an investor. So let's say a college endowment or a family would give capital to an investor and say, "Hey, use our money, pair it with your own money, and then we will. Then you give us your money, the money back within a fairly short period of time."
So that's why
Right?
you have to flip it. You have to get rid of it fast.
That's exactly right. So all that is background to say that permanent equity is in many ways like the inverse of traditional private equity. So we buy with no intention of selling the business. We typically use no debt in our transactions. We
So
hold it
I'll
indefinitely.
just set this up. I mean, you're doing a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
job. Well, I'll slow down because not everybody understands this.
yeah.
Your conviction is you want to turn it on its head or do it almost exactly as the opposite way. You don't want to flip it. You don't want to sell it fast. You want to keep it. In one of your podcasts or one of your, I forget, or one of your blogs, you said you used a 30-year relationship, and another caught my attention. You said a 27-year relationship. I'm not gonna hurry into a 30-year relationship. So that's almost antithetical to ordinary private equity. And why do you do that? What convictions drive that?
Yeah. So, well, one, our investors enable that. So they give us their capital for 30 years. And so we're not going to be a forced seller or a forced buyer on the front end. So, right. So we can just do whatever makes sense for the good of the business. My personal convictions are that I don't think there's a way to form good long term relationships, make good long term decisions with short term capital. And so, if you think about it as followers of Jesus, we should have the longest time horizon of everyone, right? Our time horizon should extend to eternity. And I think if you look at the way in which we treat each other, especially when you start putting the constraints of finance and private equity on things, it's really difficult to treat each other as made in the image of God. It's much easier with those constraints and with those incentives to treat each other as a means to an end, right?
Or as an asset to be
Right.
exploited, perhaps, or
It,
used?
exactly, exactly. And I think that that just comes natural. And look, I don't want those pulls on my life, right? Like I have plenty of brokenness that the Lord is working out. I don't need to have more incentives to do the wrong thing. And so, one of the things that we take very seriously is making sure that our incentives are aligned to be able to do the right thing, not only by our investors, but also by the people we work with. Life's too short. And so, we want to win together long term. We want to form long term successful relationships and not win at the expense of somebody else. And so, that means taking into account all the stakeholders that are at the table. So, if you think about it, it's not just the buyer and the seller, it's also the leadership team, it's the employee base, it's the communities that they're in. Maybe it's regulators, it's the vendors, it's the customers. And so what we try to do is we try to, stretch that time horizon functionally where it's, indefinite, which is, hence the name of the firm is permanent equity. It has a better ring than semi-permanent equity because obviously nothing on this earth is permanent. But yeah, and we just try to do things the way in which we feel called to do them.
So I'm jotting notes as you speak. So one thing, so I teach ethics, and one thing I sometimes say is we want to make it easy to do the right thing. So you're saying let's align the incentives with treating people well. So you don't only want to treat people well, but it's easy to treat people well if you have a long-term horizon. Second thing, we pray, lead us not into temptation. You're not going to set yourself up for temptation, for the temptation to make a quick buck by laying people off that perhaps will have their life ruined and really shouldn't be laid off. That's the second one. And the third one is, love your neighbors yourself. It sounds, in your field, you talk about stakeholders a lot of times, which means owners and people who've worked there a long time and suppliers and so forth, as well as investors naturally. But there's a lot of stakeholders, and in some way or other, they're all your neighbor. You're trying to take care of all your stakeholders, not just your limited partners. Does that sound right?
Yeah, correct. And the idea is that I think that if we go with the grain of the universe as God's created it, actually the returns are better, not worse in the long term, right? Now you're always going to have short-term trade-offs, but at least I've found my career took off when I started following the Word of God. Undeniable that the way in which God's designed us to operate, if we can operate within that, there's a flourishing that occurs that I just don't think can occur any other way. And I don't just mean financial flourishing. I mean, relational flourishing. I mean, enjoying the work that we do. I mean, work is pre-fall for our good and for God's glory, right? It's not something that we need to suffer through. Now, there are going to be thistles and thorns. We live in a Genesis 3 world, right? And so things will happen, but I think we can do that with a trust and with knowing that we're trying to honor God in that process. And it really, radiates out a flourishing that we want not only just to hit people at the the office, but also want them to have a better relationship with their families. We want to have better marriages as a result of working with us. We don't always, do that, and we have to say sorry often. But that's the aim that we're trying to hit.
And equity used to be one of those fields. I mean, I've known people who worked in equity, and they tend to work 80 hours a week and then burn out after 5 years. And you're trying to have a sane schedule. You are married. You have I forget now. I've read about you. I've read your
You have four
blogs.
kids.
4 kids. You
Yeah,
relatively recently, your fourth child was born. Is that right?
that's correct. My
Yeah,
son,
good.
Silas. Yeah.
In one of the blogs, and let me just make sure I recommend not only your work, I held up the book, but I'd recommend for anybody in the field of finance to go to the permanent equity site. If you look up Brent Beshore, there's not a lot of Brent Beshores in the world, right? But
I
if you
don't think so.
certainly looked up Brent Beshore and permanent equity, you would find a lot of content on their website, and it's easy to find. It says content, and then and you find blogs and philosophy. After a while, you started writing about your personal story. You did really well. I mean, in one of your pieces, you said the age of 28, you made $1 million a year. You were at the White House. You had a bright and hot wife. Those are your words, not mine. But she didn't always do everything the way you wanted her to do it. You weren't pleased with your life. You didn't want to have kids, like maybe because they get in the way. I don't know. But something happened. 2007, things changed with regard to your career, but you also went from a cynical atheist to a believer. You want to tell us a little bit of your life story?
And I tell you what, when I see people who are seemingly far away from the faith, it gives me hope that like, if Jesus can come for me, I feel like he can come for anybody. If you had met me when I was in my late 20s, mid to late 20s, it's unrecognizable my life now compared to then. And I told my mom I didn't believe in God when I was 9. I can distinctly remember we were in Joplin, Missouri. That's where I grew up, and we were driving past the Carl Richards bowling alley. And I told her, I said, I don't believe in God. She said, "Well, everyone's got to make up their own mind on these matters." And my brother, I remember, was in the back seat. He starts crying, and the whole thing just never made much sense to me. I'm
Was
sure I
he
heard the
older or
gospel.
younger than you?
He's younger. He's about 3.5 years younger. Such a sweet guy. Yeah, it just never made sense. I mean, we'd go to church, and I'd hear a lot about Jesus's blood. Didn't really understand what any of it meant, and I can just remember I thought that you had to be a good person in order to earn God's love and affection, right? And I was like, well, how in the world do you know that you earned enough of it? And by the way, I looked at the lives of the people around me and who professed to be religious, and their lives just didn't look that different from people who didn't ascribe anything to faith. And so it just seemed like a big waste of time to me, to be honest. I also sort of realized early on that things went better for me if I achieved things, if I won things. And so, my childhood into my 20s was all about winning and achieving. And I think that's what you referenced was, I got to 28 and I won a lot of the games that I was set out to win. In fact, God's got such a funny way of working. I deserve to be smited, right? Like if you looked at what I professed, I was an enemy of God. I was far from God. I was living for myself. I was not kind. And instead of God, taking things away from me, He actually gave me ever more than I ever could have dreamed. And at 28, like I said, I was making a lot of money, more money than I ever thought I'd make. I had a beautiful wife who loved me. I had friends who liked me, and man, I just felt hollow, empty inside. I can remember everything was just gray, and it was kind of like what I think people describe as like a midlife crisis. I just happened to have it in my late 20s. I think it was accelerated,
So you had your
and
faith crisis at 8 instead of 17
that's
or 18,
exactly
and you
right.
had your
That's
midlife
exactly
crisis at age 28.
that's exactly
How
right.
old are you right now? May I ask? You don't
I'm
seem real old.
42.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I'm
thought.
42. Yeah, it was interesting around that time, I started meeting these people and their lives looked so different. They seemed joyful and relaxed and genuinely loving. And I'd say, "Hey, what do you have? What do you have that I don't?" And they'd say, "Oh, I follow Jesus." And I'd be like, "You got to be kidding me. What? What in the world are you talking about?" And so anyway, I got to know some of them and they were really smart and well read and we would spar on a lot of these topics and I would I would say, no, you don't have a right here. This, and they say, you're not as well educated as you think you are. You need to go read more. And I really enjoyed it. There's a particular pastor, Dave Cover, who I think you know. And I remember Dave sitting down with me for, gosh, that first time, probably 2.5 hours. And we just went at it. And he very much held his own as Dave does.
Yeah,
And
he's gifted.
he became a mentor of mine, and I'm so grateful for how he poured into me. I actually heard the gospel in his men's group for the first time. I can distinctly remember where we were. We were at a restaurant, and somebody said something about needing to do something better, and said, "Yeah, I'm really working on doing things better too." Something about God, God's affection or something. And they were like, "That's not the gospel." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And
There's
anyway,
nothing like a good mistake that needs to be corrected on the spot to get
oh,
our
for
attention.
sure. For sure. And so that really set me off. It was like a shockwave through my life. And it was a couple of years of intense study and ultimately went from God being an impossibility to a plausibility to a probability. And then ultimately, I can remember the day I came home and I said, tell my wife, I was like, it's all true. And it changes everything.
Yeah, it does. But it's also true as I read about your work, and of course I have friends who know about your work. They told me to contact you in the first place. There are some aspects of the faith that kind of resonated with the way God made you. And in your various pieces, you say in one place, you hate debt and you hate stress. Of course, leveraging buyouts or purchases at 5% is stressful and debt laden. You want to build businesses the way they should be built. Family, you loved your wife. You didn't want to have kids right away. Now you're delighted to have kids. You like to build things. You like to build things for the long term. It seems to be part of who you've been for a long time, maybe the way God made you. And so you got into the equity field in this alternate way that's Christian, but also seems to be the way God somehow influenced you before you were a believer. Maybe you fell into it a little bit. I mean, even you talk about aligning the investor and the company, which, is a very Christian concept. We should be aligned. Can two walk together unless they be agreed? One translation says in one place, you want to align with each other. And everybody who talks about making the world work will say things like taking your time to make sure you don't talk people into things. You're actually exploring an issue carefully. So your faith seems to help you become the truest version of yourself.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, isn't that the truth for all of us too? I mean, can we live our true version of ourselves without that? I don't think so. I think that's what we're made for, and certainly God. I mean, I'm functionally unemployable outside the current context, so I don't think I'd last a week working somewhere else. So I don't have many other options. I'm glad God put me where He put me.
Okay, I think you could probably be employed somewhere else, but we'll let that go for now. One of the things I notice about your website and your writing is that you use very secular sounding concepts that are Christian. So, for example, you say in one of your places, you want to have a good business, don't be a jerk. So that could be translated as love your neighbors, right? That's kind of don't do the negative. Don't be transactional. Don't treat people as a means to an end, treat them as an end. Now you could be quoting Immanuel Kant there. I don't know if you are. I don't know if you are. I don't know if you deliberately quote Kant, but it was one of the places, of course, he wasn't a Christian, but it was one of the places where his values align very much with Christianity. You don't treat people as a means. They are an end in themselves. It's a way of describing Christ-like love, treat people as an end in themselves. I think you try to use secular language to convey Christian ideas. Why do you do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, so obviously, I'm a follower of Jesus. There's no such thing, I don't think, as a Christian company, right? There's no company that can give its life to Christ. It's just a collection of people. And one of the things that I love most about when I started learning about Jesus is that He didn't just hang out with the religious elites, right? He made contact with the world, and He hung out with people who maybe the world would cast away, and did. And so one of the things that I try to do is not create barriers to people working with us or learning about Jesus, maybe just indirectly through kind of the experience they have with us. And so I think it'd be easy, and I think that it's easy to fall into like a Christianese, right, where you're constantly using Christian language, which, for me, I'm
It's
sensitive to
alienating
it because
to secular people. It's
I would have
alienating.
alienated. I
Yeah.
would have been alienated
Yeah.
by that,
Right.
right? And so what I try to do is, as we think about crafting the language that we use, craft language that's an invitation for people to ask maybe deeper questions. And people do. It's one of my favorite things about my work is that we get to work with people of all different faith backgrounds, all different levels of comfort with Christianity. And people will say, "Now, wait a minute. Why do you do that, or why do you say that?" And then I get to earn the right to be able to tell them the truth that's maybe underneath it, right? So, instead of saying something like, we're, made in the image of God, and here's kind of the way we're doing it, we say, hey, everyone can kind of agree, be kind to the person, don't be a jerk, right?
And don't be
W
transactional with
Don't be
people. You can make
transactional.
a financial
Correct.
transaction, but don't be transactional with people.
Correct. And then that begs the question, well, why not? Why
Mhm.
shouldn't we do that? Right. And then there's a deeper conversation to be had. So, all the language, I want to make sure there's nothing that's obviously incompatible with
Mhm.
what Jesus says. And I don't, to my knowledge, there's nothing that we do that is that way, at least outwardly. Our aim is to try to serve the Lord. But when you read the website, it's not abundantly obvious kind of what's the direction that comes from it. There are a lot of shared, sort of shared values and shared wisdom across different faith backgrounds. And I mean, I met lots of people that are atheists who share a lot of the same values that we do. The question is just why? Is it just a preference, or is there something deeper underneath it? And that's where I love to get into questions of, oh, hey, you and I share a lot in common. That's great. What do you root your background in? Like, why do you say it's better to treat somebody well than poorly? And then you get into the questions of kind of apologetics in that.
Yeah, although, of course, lately, the studies that have indicated that treating people well and not stripping out wealth as fast as possible and not looking for a rapid, questions about whether even the quarterly reporting, of earnings is the best thing to do because it keeps people short-term instead of long-term. So, secular people will align, and more people have found that the long term pays off as well, and investing in companies that are honest pays off as well, maybe even better. But not everybody buys that. Some people go for the quick. Let me ask you a different question. You do start talking in 2024 more overtly about your faith. Your newsletter, your 2024 end of the year newsletter, had a little review of your marriage, which implied that since you started following Jesus, you're less selfish, celebrating the birth of another child after saying you didn't want children at all at one point. I laughed when I saw a term I've never seen before, which is wonderland, which means not W-O-N, but O-N-E, because when you were younger, you were pretty reckless with your body and were overweight for a long time, and you've gotten below 200 pounds. That's wonderland. And you say explicitly that you were an atheist who used to mock Christians, but God rescued you and is now the cornerstone of your life. What made you, obviously you've been implicit about your faith and you have Christian values shot through what you do. What made you decide to be more explicit? I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you were always that explicit, but I think you made a little shift toward more explicit expression of your faith.
Yeah, actually, I remember it was probably 2000, oh gosh, 2017 or 18 that I really, to that point, I had come to faith about 11, little over 11 years ago. So 2014. And I kind of was closeted in my faith for the first, call it 3 or 4 years. In the world that I live in, it's not a common topic to come up, right? It's about making money and doing worldly things and playing worldly games. And I remember having conversations with some of my dear friends and including Dave Cover, as I mentioned earlier, about that. And I said, hey, I think I'm ready to start talking about this publicly. So it's been probably, oh gosh, 7 years or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, since I started talking publicly about my faith. On social media, I do a decent amount of talking about it. I think as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm willing to be more vulnerable about my shortcomings and really trying to help other people see that the lie is that if people really know you for who you are, including your shortcomings, that you'll be rejected, you'll be alone, people won't care about you, and really to show that my experience, and I think that this is the beauty of grace that flows through us, is my experience is the exact opposite. The more that I can be known of who I really am, including my hopes and dreams, but also my shortcomings, and failures, the more people are attracted to the authenticity and the realness of that. And so, my hope is that by sharing the struggles that I've had, that maybe it opens the door for other people to reach out. And actually, to your point, the letter that I wrote, so I write once a year an annual letter, and the one you read from last year, I had a lot of people reach out and talk about everything from health related things that I put in the note to children. I've been public about issues and struggles that I've had in my marriage in the past, and some real healing in that department that I'm just so grateful for. We talked about miscarriages in the past that we've had a lot of men reach out and say, "Hey, I'd never talked about this, with anybody. I didn't even know this is something you could talk about." So, opening the door and sort of trying to shift the Overton window a little bit on what's allowed to be talked about, especially in a finance setting, which is, very historically sterile in its sort of applicability. So that's my goal. My hope is that just to try to serve people and try to be not only somebody who maybe can be great at their job, and we're aiming to be great at private equity and do it the right way, but also to be human and to say, hey, no matter what your job is, no matter what place that God's put you in and what He's given you to steward, that you can also just be a human and talk about real stuff.
Yeah, boy, we have a lot of shared experiences. For what it's worth, a number of years ago, we lost a child through miscarriage. And I went looking for literature, and I literally couldn't find anything. And the article, so then I said, okay, I'm a writer. I'm going to write about this. And it's one of it's either the most or second most republished thing I've ever written. And people, I wrote it 35 years ago. People still write me notes and say, hey, remember that thing you wrote? Can you send me a copy? And my friend needs this. Certainly true. For what it's worth, I was not an atheist, but I was a heavy agnostic and was kind of hoping Christianity wouldn't be true because at the age of 8, for me, I heard from my Sunday school teacher that if I became a Christian, I would get to live in a cloud and play a harp and sing songs to Jesus without a body. And I thought, I don't want any part of that. I don't, that
Doesn't
is
sound
not
great, does it?
that is not a
No.
future that an 8-year-old boy who likes sports has any interest in. So I was an agnostic. I was much like you. And I think so many of us find that if we're more honest about our feelings, we find more friends, not fewer. Nobody likes to be with somebody who's perfect because they're not perfect. And it's nice to know that you're not perfect either. So we have a lot of common threads, and it is great that you have expertise in your field that makes people want to talk to you about these matters. I'm grateful for that. You also have some conferences. You have one that's coming up called Main Street. It's for entrepreneurs. But why do you have a conference? And it started off being, I guess, secular or just an ordinary conference on finance and equity and businesses. And then it got a Christian channel at some point. My friend Sarah Zylstra is going to be there. My friend Mark Vergop is going to be there. And I'm going to be there. We're all going to be speaking to entrepreneurs. Why did you have a conference in the first place, number one? And number two, why did you start a Christian channel?
Well, I think that as Christians, hospitality is one of the highest callings we can have. And I mean, we're called to live in community. And I think one of the things that people are desperate for these days is community, real community, not the fake cotton candy community that social media can provide. And so when I look back at the origins, so it's called Main Street Summit, and it's 1,000+ people will gather in Columbia, Missouri, November 4th to the 6th, and it's for owners, operators, and investors in small to medium-sized businesses. It brings together a group of people which are all in the trenches on a day-to-day basis, really trying to battle it out. It's hard to run a small business and operate a small business. And so we wanted to provide a platform for people to get to know one another and to genuinely become friends. I mean, one of the things you'll hear when I take the stage to make introductions is that, a lot of business conferences are about transaction. So how do you come in this getting more? My hope for people who attend Main Street Summit is that they gain a friend. And you don't gain a friend by trying to get as much as you can. You gain a friend by trying to serve and trying to figure out how to help people and try to be honest with who you really are. And so that's the tone that we try to strike. And this is the third year that we've done it. Each year has been, there's been my friends who come, which are, there was a lot of them, they're Christians. This year is the first year that we've done an overtly faith and work track. So we're really trying to explore the intersection between faith and work and trying to bring people like you to help people understand what does it mean to be excellent at our work, but excellent the theology of our work as well. Like understand the why underneath it. Why do we get up and do the way we do? And what do we do when we have a moral conflict in the business? How do we treat employees with dignity? What does that look like? Should we be making a profit? Should we be making more profit than we're making? What does it look like to do something with those profits? Are we just called to make as much money and give it away? These are the types of questions that we want to explore, and for people who are interested at the intersection of faith and work. And so that's definitely the track that you're coming in for. Couldn't be more grateful for it. And my hope was with you. You get to make a new friend or two while you're in town, and the same for everyone else, that they get to meet some new people.
I'm hoping to bring a couple people with me too, and
Great.
to stay as long as I can. I can't stay the whole time because I have another job, but that is to say, I'm not an entrepreneur and I don't run a business. So I'm going to stay as long as I can and try to meet some people and make some friends. Okay, let me. I know you're only 42. I was guessing you were 40 just from your face, but or maybe 39. Oh, I thought you were 33. That's what I meant to say. I was guessing
Here's
you were
20 bucks.
somewhere
Appreciate that.
around 40. Let's imagine you're speaking to somebody who's getting started in your field. They might be 23. They might be 33. They found that their first job is not the one for them. We'll imagine you've got 70 seconds, right? Walk into the car. What would you say to somebody? They say, Brent, you hosted this. Give me your wisdom. What's your best wisdom for me? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, first, I would say that who you do things with is way more important, especially in your early 20s, than what you're doing. Uh, Make sure that you're in an environment where you can learn a lot, both what to do and what not to do. But be in an environment where you get to try and taste a lot of different things would be a kind of a primary piece of advice. Um, I'd say treat everything you do as if it's the most important job in the world. I mean, we're called to whatever our hands find to do it unto the Lord, right? With excellence. We worship a God who is excellent, and being made in His image, we have excellence put into us. And I think sometimes we forget that. We think that there are certain tasks that are important and other tasks that aren't important. One of the things that I find most encouraging about working really with anybody, especially younger people, is when they take maybe a job that doesn't seem that important very seriously and do it with excellence. I can tell you that those are the people who get given more and more and more. And it's the steward principle, right? If you can steward a little, you can steward more. And if you can't steward a little, you get that even taken away from you, right? I mean, God tells us this. I think the same thing works in business. The more that you can be a person of high integrity and just do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it every single time, high reliability. I think in your early 20s, that's far more important than quote unquote being on the right track or having the most prestige. It seems like that most people in their early 20s are optimizing for impressiveness, right? Especially maybe to be impressive to the opposite sex at a bar. But I think that's the exact wrong way to go about doing it. Is align yourself with people who you can have a deep relationship with, that you can learn from, that you can soak in, and then just do everything that you're called to do with excellence. The rest will take care of itself. I've really never seen anybody who's done that and not turned out pretty well for themselves as well.
Well, I agree with you. Let me say it. Let me just underscore it by saying it my way or a slightly different way. And that is do your job really well. People will notice, number one. Number two, then if you want to do something different, you volunteer, people will take you up on that offer and you can do well at that. And if you want to get out of what you're doing right now or some aspect of it, do everything you're supposed to do and then do something else besides. And if you're really good at that, then people may say, oh, this is a higher order task. You're fulfilling it well. What can we take off of your responsibility set so that you can do more of this higher order work? Don't ask to get out of things. Ask to do something more after you've proven yourself.
I would say actually maybe add one more too. I think that there's a temptation to look at the world as being a big place with lots of people to transact with. And so you can kind of use people and spit them out, and that it really wouldn't matter because you're playing a one times game. I found the exact opposite to be true. I find that the world is a lot smaller than we think it is, and they're just the way that God's created it. That people keep popping up in your life, and so I would say is just never burn bridge. never burn a bridge. Just treat people really, really well, even if they don't deserve to be treated well. Exit things well. Have people say nice things about you. Not to say that you're fearful of man and what they would say, but in a way that is honored. You honored them and you honored the position that you were in. That will catch up with you in all the best ways, and the opposite will catch up with you in all the worst ways as well.
One last question. You ready?
I'm ready.
5 years from now, what would you like to look back upon and celebrate?
I truly, the most important thing in my life is my marriage, my family. It's not always been that way. Look, if my marriage is in a great spot, I can withstand almost anything, and it makes everything else seem easy. And so I just really want to continue to invest in my marriage, invest in my children's lives. I mean, I've got young kids. I think 5 years from now, my oldest daughter is going to be 16. I only have a few years left with her. I really want to make the next 5 years count with my family, and obviously do a great job at work as well, but do it in a way that allows me to honor my marriage, and my family along the way.
I love that answer. Brent, thanks for your time. Thanks for your work. Thanks for your blogs that you write. They're interesting. If someone is in finance or is just thinking about wants to know more about it, let me recommend one more time, Permanent Equity. It's easy to find on the internet. If you can't find it right away, go to Brent Beshore, Permanent Equity, and just press the little button that says content, and you'll find some interesting pieces that go deeper into the topics we had today. Thank you for coming. May
Thanks,
God bless
Dan.
you, and I'll look forward to seeing you before too terribly long at Main Street.
Couple weeks. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Working with Dan Doriani is a production of the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. We seek to promote faithfulness in the workplace, in education, in discipleship, and in the stories of believers who've applied their faith at work. If you want to put your faith to work and change your corner of the world, visit our website, the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. Look for faithandworkstl.org. That's one word. We'll help you start a cohort with like-minded believers who also want to practice their faith at work. This podcast is donor-supported. To keep us going, please donate on our website. Maybe more importantly, you can support us by listening, by subscribing, by sharing, by liking us, by posting us on your favorite platform, or go old school and tell a friend.